But anyway, we're talking about scientific method today, so we threw up this spell work question. You have 3 brands of plant fertilizer. What could you do to determine which fertilizer helps plants grow the highest? I kind of think you got a guess. Or I can go to the cards. And our lucky first winner is Lizzie.
Design an experiment where everything is constant, like the amount of soil the plant has, the plant, and how many times you water it, except and the independent variable or dependent variable is the fertilizer. And you measure the growth of the plants over a certain amount of days, and whichever one grows the highest with a certain amount of fertilizer grows the best.
Okay, perfect. You touched on an important part of designing an experiment, constants, having a lot of, and we call those what variables? Does start with a C, not constant variables, but similar. And remember, control variables. So you touched on a lot of control variables that you would need to have. Probably the most important control variable would be the what? The plant itself. Like which plant did you choose to grow? The fertilizer is a different type of variable. That's the thing that you are changing on purpose. And I think you mentioned it. Remember which variable that is? What? Very good. The independent variable. And I like to think of that, that starts with an I. I for independent. I did that on purpose. I set the independent variable. So I picked different fertilizers. So very good. Same amount of watering, same soil, same plant, same amount of sunlight. All those things need to be the same for the fertilizer. Then you just come back and check which one's the highest after a certain amount of time. Any questions on that? All right, that's perfect. That's just what I was looking for, making sure you had a lot of control variables in your experiment. Okay, this article is called Alarming Twisters. A tornado can cut a deadly path. What if you can't hear the alarms that alert you to take cover? 4 budding scientists design a life-saving solution. Okay. So spring and summer spell the cool weather, but if you live in Tornado Alley, an area in the U.S. considered to be the twister capital of the world, these seasons also bring screaming whirlwinds that could whip you off your feet and damage your home. It's scary, says Dylan Al, a 7th grader at Clyde Boyd Junior High in Sand Springs, Oklahoma. Tornadoes are unpredictable and they could form and hit anywhere in the area. Dylan knows to take cover when he hears storm sirens, but classmate Laura McGee was concerned for their science teacher, John Gisler, who was deaf. Laura asked if I could hear the sirens from Gisler. When I said no, the students got to talking. Turns out Gisler wasn't the only one who couldn't hear the alarms. Student Jennifer Proctor explains, we can't hear the sirens in a few places at school either, like in bathrooms and noisy hallways. Since both fire and storm sirens are high-pitched, it's easy to get them confused. Which we may have mentioned this last week. What do you do for a fire alarm? Which we may be having one later this week.
Get up and down.
You get out. What do you do if it's a tornado? Well, here we're going to simply get away from the window as much as possible, and we're going to line up in this interior hallway. We stay inside, so you can see where it would be bad to do the wrong thing for the wrong alarm. You definitely don't want to be running, at a tornado because you were doing the fire alarm. So they've got a problem. Students, I'll keep a little bit. Students can't recognize the alarms, and some of them can't even hear them. All right, next page. Okay, this worried the 4 students. Mixing the danger signals and then performing the wrong safety drill could be just as deadly as not hearing the alarms. For tornadoes, you should stay indoors and crouch with your hands covering your head, explains Austin. But for fires, students file out the nearest school exit. These 13-year-olds were so convinced their school's alarm system needed improvement that Gisler challenged them to come up with a solution. So bring it on. To put together an organized science project, the team knew they'd have to follow the scientific step process that scientists use to perform experiments. Without this process, our project would probably be a mess, says Jennifer. Here's how they followed the steps and turned their community concerns into an award-winning invention. Anybody else read? All right, I'm doing a great job. I'll keep going. All right, step 1, learn more. Believe it or not, all experiments begin with an observation. As these students pointed out, they had difficulty hearing or recognizing the warning signals at school. The team did background research to learn how they could make an alarm system that would alert everyone efficiently and accurately. First, the students searched the web for information ranging from hearing to the cost of alarm system parts. Then they spoke to experts like firefighters, alarm makers, city officials, and a speech and hearing organization to learn about safety measures and the technology behind existing alarms. But before the students could start designing their dream alarm system, they had to prove there's a real need for it. Okay, so let's switch over the notes just for a little bit, because we've done a few of the steps in the scientific method. And I guess you guys have what, the right-hand side already filled out, but not the left-hand side? Okay, so then let me catch up. So, scientific method, step 1, observe something. Hopefully you can fit that in the blank in your notes. And so that was simply their observation here. Some students can't hear the alarms, and some can't even recognize what they mean. All right. Step 2. Ask a question. Their question. Pretty much how can we fix this? How can everyone be alerted efficiently and effectively? And that step 3, which is what they just did in the article, conduct background research. So they talked to some experts. And maybe you're doing something so groundbreaking that there's minimal background research you can even do. But if possible, conduct background research. Don't repeat someone else's experiment. Okay, so get a little ahead, but there's one of the main steps we all know and love. Make a hypothesis. What's sort of a synonym for hypothesis? We say a lot. Hypothesis is a what? An educated guess. All right, anyone else want to read? Okay, continuing on. All right, so we're at step 2, get ready. So 4 students saying the school's current alarm system is ineffective doesn't provide solid evidence that it needs improvement. We needed to show that other people have problems with it too, says Austin. So they came up with a research question. How does the school community react to its alarm system? Since the team didn't know the answer, they made a hypothesis or an educated guess about the answer to the research question. Their hypothesis: the school community has trouble hearing and recognizing its fire and tornado sirens. 3, test it. You need to run experiments to see if your hypothesis is correct, says Jennifer. In order to get reliable results, the experiment must include a well-thought-out procedure or a step-by-step plan containing clear instructions to test the effect of one or more variables on another variable. The team wanted to test how people in their school respond to the alarm system, so they mapped out experiments. For one, they planned to ask student volunteers to listen to the warning signals and then identify them. Second, they would survey teachers on how well they could hear the alarms from inside their classrooms. In any experiment, there are 2 major types of variables. For the teams, the independent variables, or the factors you adjust on purpose, were the fire and tornado sirens they used in the experiment. How the test subjects responded to the sirens was the dependent variable, or factor that responds to the change. With a plan ready, the team set out to collect data or information. Okay, so back to the notes. So they made a hypothesis, and then their next step is to actually come up with an experiment to do. And their experiment's pretty simple. It's really just a survey. They're simply asking students and teachers, can you recognize the alarms? Can you even hear the alarms? So what's going to be the next step after that? Collect data. I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but there's already their data. Collect the data. And their data is just the results of their survey. Sometimes you don't have numerical data, sometimes you just have observations. Like the reaction got cloudy, made it precipitate. That'd be an observation. Okay, so step 4, answer it. After studying the data, the team reached a conclusion or a result summary. Turns out their hypothesis was correct. 35% of the students couldn't tell the difference between the fire and storm sirens, says Jennifer. And 37% of the teachers said they couldn't hear the sirens, especially if the doors were closed. This was proof the school's alarm system needed an overhaul. So there's our data. Using their research, the team moved forward with their invention. How successful were they in creating an efficient and accurate warning system? Well, the team came up with a prototype working model that amazed security experts. Their solution: install panels of different colored lights with one color assigned to each type of danger throughout the school. How simple, how brilliant. For all alarms, there'll be announcements literally telling you what the alarm is, like this is a fire drill, or this is a tornado alarm. So it is nice that they will tell us in our school. Anyway, when an alarm sounds, a corresponding colored light flashes. Flashing lights will get people who can't hear to pay attention, says Jennifer. A color code prevents confusion about which danger is at hand. Judges of the Christopher Columbus Awards, a program that challenges students to make positive changes in their communities, were impressed. The team was selected as one of the 8 national finalists for 2004. I'm proud of my students, says Gisler, but we have more to do. Now the team is raising money to install their invention in every room and hallway of their school. They hope other schools in Tornado Alley will follow. It feels good to know that perhaps our creation may someday save someone's life, says Dylan. So that article is about 9 years old, but still applies today.
What's your colorblind? And you're deaf.
Well, if you're colorblind and deaf, then hopefully you're paying attention to the people around you and what they are doing. Any other questions? Okay, so we've made it almost all the way through the scientific method. The last step in the scientific method is to simply do what? Yeah, draw your conclusions. Your conclusion is typically you were either right or you were wrong. If you were wrong, maybe it's time to redesign that experiment and start over. So they were right, and then they went on to do their colored flashing lights system. That was even won them some. All right, may I get this article back? Just fold it up, pass it forward, please. You guys in the front row, please try to line them up so they're all the same. Okay, so moving on with the notes, I really just want to finish this first page. We're doing 6 total slides today. But designing a good experiment. Talked about this in the bell work. These students designed a good experiment, but you need your variables. Just copy that down. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so our independent variable, you also mentioned that it was called a manipulated variable. That's true. An independent variable is a factor adjusted by the experiment on purpose. And ideally, if possible, sometimes it's not possible, but if at all possible, you only want that to be one thing at a time. Okay, so that you know the outcome of your experiment was truly based on that one variable and not something else. So independent variable, I like to think of it as, independent starts with the letter I change this on purpose. I'm the experimenter. This is a thing that I change on purpose. Dependent variable. So just what it says, depends. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable. So this is really the answer you are for. So the dependent variable is the answer. Do you remember the other synonym you had for dependent? You have manipulate and independent went together, I meant the same thing. Dependent, start with an R. Responding, very good. All right, and then your control variables, variables that should remain unchanged, sometimes called constants. Okay, we talked about that in the bell work. So in our little twister example, the factor adjusted by the experimenter, well, in one case they were simply adjusting the alarm itself. Was it a fire alarm? Was it a tornado alarm? The dependent variable was then their survey, like can people recognize a difference? Yes or no? Do you know what that is? And control variables, you know, they should have the same volume. If you're doing two different alarms, don't make one so faint people can't hear it. Should be coming from the same source, I guess, maybe the same location in the room. Okay, so we know our variables. So here's yet another experiment. Does storing popcorn in the freezer make a difference in the number of kernels popped? I have absolutely no idea. Maybe it does. Where's Amanda? Okay. Don't even answer these questions. Can you tell me what you might do to test that? So that's your question. Maybe you first just observed, hey, I can store my popcorn wherever. I could put it in the cabinet, I could put it in the freezer, I could put it in the fridge, I could put it on the roof, I could store it anywhere. And my question is, does storing it in the freezer make a difference in the number of kernels popped? So Amanda, what might you do?
I'd pop an unfreezed, some unfrozen popcorn kernels and pop it, and then count how many kernels were not popped, and then take some that were frozen and try to pop it. Compare it.
Okay, so we're going to get at least 2 bags. One's frozen, one's not. Pop them both. Count the kernels. Okay. Where's Mason? Mason, in this experiment, what is the independent variable?
Frozen, not frozen.
Exactly. Is it frozen? Is it not frozen? So the storage location, that's your independent variable. That is the one thing that I, the experimenter, changed on purpose. I decided where to store the popcorn. Very good. All right, where's Addison? Addison, can you tell me what the dependent variable is going to be?
The popcorn, like the kernel.
Yeah. You're right. I just want one more like specific in there.
The amount of kernels?
Yes, the number of kernels popped. Okay, so Amanda gave us the basics of her experiment, but now let's run through some control variables that she would have to have. Where's Taylor? All right, Taylor, give me one control.
Brand of popcorn.
Good, the brand of popcorn, and I would argue that's maybe even the most important. All right, is it Pop Secret and, what's another brand? Orville Redenbacher, Act 2, I don't know, generic brand. Okay. You've got to be testing the same brand of popcorn. Lexi, give me another one.
The microwave.
Perfect, the microwave. Are you popping both these bags in the same microwave? Sarah, give me another one.
Like the number of kernels you have before you pop them.
Exactly, the number of kernels you had to start with. Now this one's going to be difficult to check. So hopefully our brand accounts for that. Now, since this isn't something we can make exactly right, and if we were doing a lab report, this would be a source of error. It wasn't possible to start with the exact same number of kernels every time. But what are some things we could do to hopefully get around that? A, pick the same brand. Yeah?
You can use multiple bags for each.
Yeah, do this a lot. Have multiple trials. Okay, so hopefully our average would still show us something. So very good. You can put down whatever you want, but here a few. Brand, popping time, maybe, or, just hitting the popcorn button on your microwave, put it in there for 3 minutes. Storage time, we didn't mention that. Were they stored in the freezer / cabinet for what, a week, a month? Did you put that one bag in the freezer for 5 minutes? Is that really going to do anything? Etc. Okay, so very good job on that. So sometimes talk about a control setup. Just sort of depends on what your experiment is. This may or may not be relevant. So in a control setup, no variables are changed. That's just sort of the norm. That's the normal situation, the way life usually is. And then, of course, in our experimental setup, we would just change the one thing, change our one independent variable. We'll give them more food. Probably. But let's say here's our control setup. And you could try to some of that, but let's say this is the norm for my goldfish. 20-gallon tank. I got 10 fish in there. The water's at 22 degrees Celsius, and they're fed 5 grams of fish food twice a day. And again, my question is, do goldfish grow larger when given more food? So Sahil, that's the control setup. What is the only thing I'm going to change in the experimental setup? Am I going to change the water temperature? No. What am I going to change? Yeah, just the amount of food. Everything else should be the same. Maybe you could write ditto or something underneath so you don't have to write all that all over again. Everything's the same except we upped it to 10 grams of fish food twice a day. Okay, I want to talk about one more thing that's not in here. Do you know any interesting experiments, say in the medical field? I want to just mention on a term, it's not in the notes, but it's kind of neat, called the placebo effect. Has anyone heard of that term? Know what it means? What does it mean?
And like you give into different pills, and one pill doesn't do anything, and another pill does do what you're asking for, like 2 aspirin, and one's actually just like a sugar pill.
Yeah.
And you feel better even if you take it, because it'll make you better.
Exactly. So a control setup is something we commonly have in medical testing. You're testing a new medication. So, well, how do you know if it's going to work? Well, you have some people who are sick, whatever ailment they may have, and then you give certain people your new medication. But what are you going to compare that to? You've got to compare it to people who have the same illness and all taking what they think is the medication. So that's often a sugar pill. And then if the people who were taking the actual medication really got better, and the people who were taking the sugar pill didn't, you would know, of course, your medication worked. But very often, it's kind of a unique phenomenon, power of mind over body. The people who are taking the sugar pill get better. They just think they're taking the medication and they actually get better. One neat experiment I heard on this was pain medication. So people had like common ailment, maybe arthritis or something. So they had a certain common pain, and they were all given pain medication, but some people were given the name brand, like Tylenol or Advil, not like I don't know, CVS brand Tylenol. Okay, it's all like acetaminophen. But how did the people feel that were taking the name brand pain medication compared to those who weren't? How do you think? Surprisingly, they actually felt better. They had less pain. They recorded they had less pain because they were taking the name brand medication, even though it was the exact same thing. So that's kind of an interesting placebo effect study. Another one, this one blew my mind when I heard it, was helping people with Parkinson's. It's a neurological disorder. Maybe someone in your family has it. Often end up like a little bit of a shake. So this guy had Parkinson's, and he went in to have brain surgery. And they actually like cut his scalp, didn't do anything, stitched him back up. Told him he had brain surgery. Got better for a year. Shake away, he was fine for a year. Now Parkinson's was still there, it did come back, but that was pretty interesting. Any of you guys hear of any other interesting stories like that? Chase?
Well, I've heard one where they gave some guy like knee surgery,
Yep.
and he didn't like ever do it, and then he felt fine.
Same thing? So same thing, they cut open this guy's knee, he had knee surgery, didn't do anything, then he was fine. Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. They definitely would have had to sign off on being part of like a medical study and know that this was a possibility. Yeah, you would definitely, that would never happen if you were actually going into the hospital and you were, broke your wrist and you were going to get it set and the doctor's like, this is going to be my tester patient, I'm not going to do anything. No. These are always part of studies, medical studies, so they knew there was the possibility of that happening going in.